In Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro and his Colombian counterpart, Gustavo Petro, a joint declaration to consolidate bilateral relations and integration and peace in the region. In Ecuador, the government declared a state of emergency after 10 attacks with explosive devices and a new president arrived in the city of Esmeraldas. And also in Russia, Vladimir Putin confirms his country's readiness to Venezuela. Nicolás Maduro Moros held a meeting with his Colombian counterpart, Gustavo Petro, in order to advance in the re-establishment of diplomatic, bilateral and commercial relations between both nations. During the meeting, the heads of state of both governments reaffirmed the historical ties of brotherhood, complementarity and cooperation that unite the nations. They also assured that the most relevant task on the binational agenda is the review of the issues of common interest and the will to make joint efforts to guarantee security and peace on the border. In view of this scenario, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro Moros described his first meeting as fruitful and relevant for both nations.
It has been a fruitful, truly auspicious first meeting with good results, and surely from now on, in the remainder of this year 2022, there will be good news for both people. And from 2023 onwards, we will surely be heading the steps of integration and strengthening the relationship between our peoples, our governments, and our two countries. President Gustavo Petro, you will always be welcome, very welcome, to the homeland of Bolívar, to our beautiful country. Thank you.
President Nicolás Maduro stated that the governments of Venezuela and Colombia expect to work on issues of mutual interest, such as trade and security on the common border, in order to advance in the full re-establishment of diplomatic relations.
We have a set of important issues on which we are going to work from now on in terms of trade, economic matters, border security, the fight against drug trafficking, and in terms of continuing to strengthen our diplomatic relationships, consular relationships, the good treatment of the migratory population, the population that migrates from Colombia to Venezuela, and from Venezuela to Colombia.
In this sense, the President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, reported that a meeting between Colombian and Venezuelan business persons was proposed in Cartagena to start a new period of commercialization between both nations.
Proposed to make a meeting of Colombian and Venezuelan businessmen in Cartagena. Let's see that it is in Cartagena returning our visit here, so that they themselves build ties freely that strengthen the basis of a trade, hopefully powerful, hopefully a plural trade, where the small peasant can get there, where the small peasant here can get there, trade also popular in the popular economies.
Among other issues, the Colombian President, Gustavo Petro, asked the member countries of the Andean community to accept the return of Venezuela to the international organization.
Now we want to invite Chile, Ecuador, Bolivia, Peru to accept the reinstatement of Venezuela in the Andean community as a member with all the powers, with all its rights and duties. We have also requested, you will discuss this, Venezuela's integration into the Inter-American human rights system.
Now we move on to other topics. Following 2 days of silence, the outgoing president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, affirmed that he will abide by the mandate of the Constitution while confirming the beginning of the government transition. During his speech, the president and former candidate for the re-election for the Liberal Party made no mention of the electoral victory of the Workers' Party candidate Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva. However, Bolsonaro asked his followers to lift the road blockades they have been maintaining since Monday, in rejection to Lula's victory under the pretext that the acts of violence in the country are only exercised by the left. After the speech, the chief of staff of the presidency of Brazil, Ciro Nogueira, confirmed that Bolsonaro authorized the transition of government that will begin on Thursday.
Our strong representation in Congress demonstrates the strength of our values: God, country, family, and freedom. We shape different leadership in Brazil. Our dreams are more alive than ever. We are in favor of order and progress. Even facing the whole system, we overcame a pandemic and the consequences of war. I was always labeled as anti-democratic, and contrary to my accusers, I always acted within the Constitution. I never talked about censoring the media and social networks. As President of the Republic and as a citizen, I will continue to comply with all the commandments of our Constitution.
We'll take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Ecuador, the cities of Guayaquil and Esmeraldas were the target of at least 10 attacks with explosive devices and car bombs. According to information published by the National Police of Ecuador, these events took place in Tuesday's early hours, where 2 agents died in Guayaquil. Rescue forces reported having attended 7 emergencies caused by the explosives. At the same time, in the men's prison in the city of Esmeraldas, a group of inmates kidnapped some penitentiary guides as a measure of pressure so that the police will not enter the wards 8 and 9, but they were recently released. Amid this scene of violence, the president of Ecuador, Guillermo Lasso, decreed a state of emergency in the provinces of Guayas and Esmeraldas, a measure already implemented in the other parts of the country without success.
That's why I'm traveling to Guayaquil to lead the Unified Command Post. I am declaring a state of emergency in the provinces of Guayas and Esmeraldas, and a curfew from 9 o'clock at night. The forces of order will intensify their operations to ensure the safety of the citizens of Guayas and Esmeraldas. They already understood that our hand will not tremble when it comes to respond accordingly.
In this context, 200 inmates were transferred from a Litoral penitentiary to other prisons for arrangements. The National Service of Integral Attention to Adults Deprived of Liberty and Adolescent Offenders, SNAI, informed that the transfers will be carried out from the Guayas Prison Number 1. The institution indicated that the actions are carried out with the objective of improving the conditions of habitability, safeguarding the security of persons deprived of liberty, servers, and avoiding acts that violate the regulations and activities of that penitentiary. After the announcement made by the National Service of Integral Attention to Adults Deprived of their freedom, the inmates of El Rodeo prison in Puerto Viejo warned of a new riot if the inmates transferred from the penitentiary of El Litoral, responsible for the massacre of February 23, 2021, arrived to this penitentiary. Now we move on to other topics. In Panama, social organizations and trade unions are mobilizing in the country's capital to demand the right to a dignified life. Hundreds of citizens will be mobilizing towards the headquarters of the Social Security Fund to protest against the shortage of resources and medicines in the health system. They'll also be marching against a new law which seeks to increase the contributions of the insured and to raise the retirement age. In this regard, the Alianza Pueblo Unido por la Vida said that in view of the boycott of the second phase of the dialogue between the government and the private sector, who are pressuring the Catholic Church, which is acting as a mediator, there is no other alternative than to return to the streets. In Colombia, the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, JEP, gave an account of the work it carried out during the last years. During an event held on Tuesday in Medellin, it revealed a report in which it points out that more than 350 public hearings have been held and 977 reports from social organizations have been received. Also, authorities of the JEP detailed that 3 new macro cases of investigation have been opened, among them crimes committed by the public forces and state agents in association with paramilitaries and crimes committed against ethnic territories. In addition, the JEP's imposition of sanctions will be monitored by the United Nations Verification Mission with respect to the proposals presented by the victims and national authorities to repair the crimes committed during the armed conflict. In Antigua and Barbuda, the Prime Minister, Honorable Gaston Brownie, in his independence speech, announced that today marks the 41st anniversary of the country's political independence and also commemorates the nation's struggle for freedom, highlighting the achievements during these 4 decades.
For more than 4 decades, we have successfully advanced and improved the welfare of our people, creating a much higher standard of living than we inherited. We have created better quality and higher paying jobs, constructed roads where they did not exist, and we have built highways that were previously beyond imagination. We have built more homes and given more people ownership in 41 years than existed in the previous 3 centuries, and have educated more Antiguans and Barbudans to secondary and university levels in 4 decades than in 300 years of previous generations. These were extraordinary accomplishments in an extraordinarily short space of time.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The government of Colombia decreed on Tuesday a national disaster situation due to the heavy rains. The National Unit for Disaster Risk Management stated that the rainy season and the La Niña phenomenon will increase the cost of living in the country. In view of this scenario, it warns of a situation of hunger in poor and highly vulnerable communities in the country. The entity also highlighted that since the rainy season began, there have been at least 266 fatalities, over 196,000 families affected, and 390 municipalities issued a declaration of public calamity. According to statements made by the President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, the levels of rainfall recorded in the country since March are the highest in the last 40 years, with high probabilities that the rainfall will extend until 2023. The government of Peru fined the Spanish oil company Repsol $10 million for providing false information and failing to act accordingly after the oil spill off the coast of Lima. According to the Environmental Evaluation and Control Agency, OEFA, attached to the Ministry of the Environment, the first fine imposed was equivalent to more than $3 million for including false information in the emergency report containing the calculation of the volume of crude oil spilled, the affected area, and the period of the spill, while the second fine was for not carrying out the containment and recovery of the spilled oil, as well as not cleaning the affected area. In addition, the OEFA stated that a lawsuit for $4 to $5 billion is being processed in the Peruvian courts against Repsol and 5 Solidarity companies. And sheets of dried salt now cover former farmland outside the town of Mutuas in Egypt's Nile, the river delta, a threat that could spread to more land if action is not taken to combat the rising sea levels. Located on Egypt's northern Mediterranean coast, the Nile River Delta is one of the 3 most vulnerable spots in the world to the effects of climate change, including sea level rise. Farmers have had to watch a large part of their crops spoil every year. As Egypt hosts the UN's COP27 Global Climate Summit this month, the country's leaders have stated that the situation in the delta, known for its fertile soil, is one of their main concerns. The inhabitants are hoping for help in coping with the consequences of global warming. Now we move on to other topics. Russian President Vladimir Putin confirmed his country's readiness to supply significant quantities of grain and fertilizers to Africa free of charge. The Russian president said during a conversation with his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan that Moscow will be ready to reactivate the grain export agreement after investigating the attack on its Black Sea fleet last week. He also said that it is necessary to thoroughly investigate the circumstances of this incident and to receive real guarantees that Kiev will strictly comply with the Istanbul agreements. Putin also stressed that he will emphasize the inadmissibility of the use of the humanitarian corridor for military purposes. In Russia, Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said that a total of 300,000 men were drafted in the partial call-up, and 87,000 of them were deployed to Ukraine.
In accordance with the presidential decree of September 21, 2022, 300,000 people were called up during partial mobilization. At the initial stage, there were shortcomings in the activities of the military commissariats. We have taken urgent measures to improve their work. These have brought results. All regions have sent the specified numbers of draftees to the military units. On October 29, 2020,